Go back to the
with
beginning.
U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, an exclusive.
I'm pleased to be with Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. This time you're back on Bloomberg in Argentina. Thanks for joining us again.
Good to be with you. Good to be in Buenos Aires.
Yeah, it's fantastic here. So you've come here at a time when the IMF has just announced this $20 billion agreement with Argentina.
Prosperity is ahead for Argentina. I mean, things are going really well under Milei. Now you're under the thumb of the IMF for a big loan, too. 20 billion's not nothing. 20 billion.
But we haven't seen a Treasury Secretary come to Argentina since Trump's first administration, and that was for a G20. So why the emphasis from the Trump administration on Argentina?
Well, Anne Marie, a couple of reasons. The reason for being here today is today's a fulcrum day. So the Milei administration has done 3 adjustments, and this marks the beginning of the third one. So they did a large fiscal adjustment, a large monetary adjustment, and they're doing they announced on Friday a large currency adjustment. IMF has allocated $20 billion to them. The World Bank has allocated $12 billion, and I wanted to come here today to show support for President Milei and his commitment to what I think is historic in terms of bringing Argentina back from the precipice.
When it comes to the trade negotiations, I'm sure you spoke.
Dude, the IMF is so comically evil. The fund praised President Milei's tough austerity program and zero deficit fiscal policy, saying the program sought to, quote, consolidate impressive initial gains and address remaining macroeconomic vulnerabilities. So we're really happy, Milei, with how you've hollowed out your country for foreign capital. Now, it has created the problem of you being broke as shit and having no reserves of foreign currency because no one's actually spending foreign money in your country because your country is broken and produces nothing. So we're going to give you billions of dollars. You'll be in debt to us forever. Well, your people will be. You'll stay wealthy, Mr. Milei. But your people will remain in debt to us for 100 years, maybe longer. But we're really proud of how well you've done in like facilitating this, basically. You've set the nation up for a debt trap very effectively.
With President Milei about the 10% rate that Argentina was hit with. Do you think at some point that can come down to zero?
Look, I think we're going to start the negotiations, and just like with everyone else, I'm telling them, bring your A game. We'll see what you got, and we'll go from there.
Can any country go to zero?
We'll see. I don't know what's going to happen with the
No one knows what's going on, lady. No one has any clue. Okay, don't ask me shit like that.
Negotiations, because we've got a whole box of things we've got to overcome: tariff, non-tariff trade barriers, currency manipulation, and subsidization of labor and facilities. So there's a big menu there.
There's been
the funny thing is you would actually think they'd be anti-Milei's decision to devalue their own currency, because that does make them a more attractive target for like foreign capital investment and manufacturing and like a more export-driven economy. But nothing means anything and nobody's consistent, so it doesn't really matter.
Focus on Latin America writ large from the Trump administration in the first 100 days. Is Latin America policy also, in a sense, China policy for this administration?
Well, I think that might be a good description, because what we are trying to keep from happening is what has happened on the African continent, where China has signed a number of these kind of rapacious deals marked as aid, where they are really, they've taken mineral rights, they've added huge amounts of debt onto.
Remember when, how nefarious of them. Hey, Siri, bring up the time that Trump said that the United States would secure a peace treaty with Russia in exchange for $500 billion of rare earth minerals in Ukraine. You know, that time that we secured resource rights in Ukraine, or attempted to, and disguised it as aid. Sorry, China's just better than us at this because they're less racist. Like, the average Chinese citizen is probably more racist than the average American. China as a state is too concerned with like longevity to allow racism to affect their decision making. Look at how much the Trump administration tore up our soft power all across the world for like pennies on the dollar, we were propping up like Western influence in the entire continent of Africa practically through US aid. We just tore it all up for literally no reason other than because we were helping black people.
To these countries' balance sheets. It's undisclosed to any of the other international organizations. They've got tolling arrangements. So they're guaranteeing that future generations are going to be the poor and without resources. And we don't want that to happen any more than it already has in Latin America.
China has a foreign exchange swap with Argentina. Would you consider a credit line directly from the United States?
That's not under consideration in terms of, so they have an $18 billion credit swap in RMB. Argentina, under the previous Peronist government, drew down $5 billion, and that will remain outstanding. The Chinese showed very good faith effort after the announcement, or in conjunction with the IMF announcement, so that is going to be rolled forward for a year.
But do you want them to get rid of that swap with Beijing?
Well, I think as this administration continues their stay the course on their economic policies, they should eventually have
What the fuck is Peronism? Nobody knows.
Enough foreign exchange inflows to be able to pay that off.
So less than 2 weeks ago, you and I were talking.
Yeah, it's crazy because I'm reading on another monitor. I'm reading over the details of this loan, which are removing, to quote PBS.org, quote, a tangle of regulations that help to stabilize the peso at an official rate and prevent capital flight from Argentina. Clamp down on companies' access to dollars, discouraging foreign investment that Milei needs to achieve his goal of transforming heavily regulated Argentina into a free economy. In other words, Milei is doing the exact thing to Argentina that Trump bitches about China doing. Artificially deflating currency, structuring an export-driven economy that's meant to attract US dollars and investment, opening yourself up to foreign investment as a effort to incentivize U.S. jobs coming in. Milei is doing everything that Milei is doing is the shit that the Trump administration bitches about other countries doing.
Talking outside of the White House after what the president called Liberation Day, and you said you weren't part of the negotiations. Now you're leading them. What's changed in these past 12 days?
No. What I said was I didn't construct the actual
tariff rates.
The tariff rates. I've always been part of the tariff policy. I had been focusing on tax. Maybe you want to talk about that later. That's going very well. And now with the trade negotiations, I'm going to be part of that. And the president has hit a 90-day pause button, and we are moving quickly with many of our most important trading partners. So we had Vietnam in last week. We have Japanese in on Wednesday, South Korea next week. So it's going to move fast. And but the important thing.
I'm sorry, 1 second. I didn't realize how many times they had done this. Yet, for all of the changes in financial pain, there have been scant signs of a sustainable recovery in Argentina. Analysts say that a long-term economic revival involves the removal of capital controls, the amassing of currency reserves, and access to international capital markets. As a result, foreign investors have waited on the sidelines, wary of pouring their cash into a country infamous for defaulting on its debt. The South American nation is already the IMF's biggest debtor, owing some $43 billion. This new $20 billion loan represents the 23rd rescue package in the nation's long and tumultuous history. The world's only fourth world nation. Remarkable. Prosperity is ahead for Argentina.
For your viewers to know is we're setting up a process, and we are going to run that process. It's going to be orderly, and at the end of the day, especially for the most important trading partners, the president's going to be involved.
So when it comes to the current negotiations this week, you're also sitting down again with the Spanish negotiating team, the Japanese negotiating team, and also the Spanish economy minister? Well, the Spanish economics minister was just a prearranged meeting. He and I have never met. So that is not a trade sit-down. The Japanese meeting is a trade negotiation. The Japanese prime minister recently said he's not going to rush to get a compromise and a negotiation. How quickly do you think you can see these deals come to fruition? Well, again, I think there will be advantage to our
allies, especially in a first mover advantage. Usually the first person who makes the deal gets the best deal. So
who do you think will be first?
It's their choice.
He's got a very funny looking face, doesn't he? He's got like a Gumbo-esque quality to him. I think people say he looks evil. I think he's the least evil looking of the main Trump cohorts, mostly because he just looks kind of like a goofy dad a little bit. I think he's made to look evil contextually. I think phrenology is failing us on this one. He looks like a sack of potatoes. He does a little bit, but like not in the way most people would assume. But he's hired to calm down Wall Street. Well, it's working, at least for now. He looks like somebody drew Jeb Bush from memory. Stephen Colbert, if he believed his shit. I see it. I see it.
Is there a handful of countries that you expect to have a deal before the 90 days is up?
Oh, I think there could be numerous countries. And look, it may not be the actual trade document, but we will have an agreement in principle and be able to move forward from there.
So are we talking about a dozen or 70 plus?
Look, I think it's going to...
By the way, so it just, I guess, like the condition previous statements I've made about the unviability of tariffs, Argentina is a country that I would argue is like a perfect candidate for very aggressive protectionism. Argentina has a lot of valuable resources domestically. It does seem like the best thing they could do to stabilize would be, and the Peronists have tried this in the past, so it's not like this is a done deal or whatever. It's not an easy solution, but this would be a great example, a best case scenario, I think, for doing like a Southeast Asian Tigers kind of deal, you know? Singapore, South Korea, whatever, protectionist policy, develop local industry. 76% of Argentina's GDP is debt. Yeah, that does suck. That is pretty bad. They've tried, didn't work. Love hasn't worked out either yet, has it? But what are you going to do? Stop trying to build love?
Depend, but we're going to move with all deliberate speed. And again, it's going to be a process. It's going to be USTR, who just has mountains of data that they've been collecting over the years. Because in a funny way, the tariffs are the easiest part. So a country with high tariffs, you can just say, okay, this, get rid of it. It's the non-tariff trade barriers that are more insidious, more difficult to spot, and it's probably going to take a little longer.
91.5%.
When you said you weren't part of the rates in that chart that the president held in the Rose Garden, is he taking a maximalist approach? Neil Dudder recently wrote that President Donald Trump has cracked a lot of eggs, and now Scott Bessent, Treasury Secretary, needs to make an omelet. Is that how you view this situation right now?
I view not giving away negotiating secrets on worldwide television as the essence of negotiating.
You recently talked about getting deals done quickly with partners to then confront China together. When you're in these negotiations with trading partners, are you looking for them to offer up something to combat Beijing?
Well, I think combat's an aggressive word, but look, I think now that we have the China tariffs in place, that they are going to want to have some protection from Chinese goods flooding their markets. That China's business model is like from that Disney movie where the brooms are carrying the buckets. Like they're not going to stop manufacturing because the U.S.
So the big problem with a country like Argentina trying to trade is that nobody wants their currency, right? This is one of the reasons why it's a huge problem for them to not have a reserve of foreign currency. If the United States ran out of a reserve of foreign currency, that'd be really bad. But the country would survive because we have the USD, we have the dollar. But if you're in Argentina and you want to buy something from China or anywhere, who wants Argentinian pesos? Who wants their currency? By not having a reserve of foreign currency, they don't really have a medium that they can use to trade with other countries, you know? Ultimately, it's a downhill spiral, I think, this reliance on foreign trade in this case, because the only way they could facilitate it is either with borrowed foreign currency, with currency that they get from foreign investment, which no one wants to do because Argentina is really unstable, or by somehow stabilizing the Argentinian peso and making it worth international trade. Do you all understand the difficulty here? It's one of the reasons why I think protectionism would actually be a good idea here, because the alternative seems worse. Like the alternative, you have to do a lot of bad stuff to your currency to make it, possible to even meaningfully trade with other countries. I think that Argentina ideally should try to scale things back, focus on local trade, and allow for a little bit of capital flight from the country. If the super wealthy want to skip out on Argentina, that sucks, and it's going to be pretty difficult to, pay back those debts. But I think you need to develop like a local base of industry to even have a chance at developing the economy necessary to pay back those debts.
Has a tariff wall up, so those goods are going to go somewhere.
Where do you think they're going to dump?
Well, I think it depends on the good.
We have exemptions now, though, for electronics, so we still expect electronics to come into the United States with the smaller tariff rate, the fentanyl, 20%.
But you were asking where are they going to dump. I think it will depend on what is the good. Higher value-added manufacturing goods, likely in Europe, Canada, in the G7, and then kind of more of the baubles and knickknacks in the global South.
China's Commerce Ministry came out when the tariff rates were going above 100% and called it, quote, a joke. Has there been negotiations on any level between Beijing and Washington right now?
Well, look, it'll come from the top. President Trump, Chairman.
No, then the answer is no.
Xi have a very good relationship, and I wouldn't say that these are not a joke. I mean, these are big numbers. I think no one thinks they're sustainable, wants them to remain here, but it's far from a joke.
Oh, I'm sorry. Is that a little bit of weakness in your tone? We're not like these tariffs on China. We don't want them to persist indefinitely or anything. Like that'd be crazy. We can't do that.
Well, they just say that the rate is so high, it's become a joke. Basically, does it just stop trade between Washington and Beijing altogether? Do you see a decoupling of these two economies?
Well, maybe the trade minister has a different sense of humor I do, but I don't see anything funny about it.
Do you see a decoupling, though, between Washington and Beijing?
There doesn't have to be. There could be. There's a big deal to be done at some point, but look, what is different with China that is different in the history of trade that normally, if you go back to the big trade deals or the currency deals in the 80s, the Plaza Accord, the Louvre Accord, the Reagan auto deals, our leading economic competitors were our military allies. China is both our biggest economic competitor and our biggest military rival. So that's going to require a special kind of formula.
Are you teasing out a Mar-a-Lago Accord that we should be paying attention for in the future?
I'm not sure what you're talking about.
Well, potentially getting all these trading partners together to discuss fair, balanced trade?
Well, we're doing that over the next 90 days.
Okay. So shifts in tariff policies.
Remarkable how little they've accomplished so far. Like even by their own standards, I feel like they should have gotten some concessions by now from somebody. They have literally nothing to brag about. Not a single one. There's not a single country of every country on earth that they can be like, oh yeah, we've negotiated this deal.
Has had markets on edge. Even the president recently remarked that the bond market was, quote, queasy. Do you have a sense of who is dumping U.S. assets? Who's been dumping U.S. treasuries?
I don't think there's a dumping, and I think we saw in the tick data either today or Friday that actually foreign ownerships picked up. We had three big auctions last week, and on the longer end auction, 10-year, 30-year, we saw increased foreign competition. So I actually think this is one of those occasional VAR shocks that you get in the trading community. I think a lot of people got very leveraged, maybe out over their skis, and then you combine that.
This might be unimaginable cope on my part, and I apologize if it is. I don't like to give that to you guys. I still think that the markets are not acting as though the tariffs are real. I still think the markets haven't factored them in. I don't think they have. Now, obviously, the markets are not like a rational reflection of existing economic conditions. They're totally irrational. But I 100% think that like everyone is still betting on them being removed or ignored. Like, none of these have taken effect yet. Remember, the customs aren't even like taking the tariffs at the docks. They're like, keep track of it and move on. They're not even, nobody knows what's going on. I could be wrong. It could be, and this would maybe be the worst case scenario, it could be that the financial market has been so disconnected, so detached from reality that it can do well no matter what happens. And that's also possible, It's possible that, dividends are a small enough part of the overall picture, and the people doing the investing are crazy enough that they no longer respond to rational market signals, and everything is traded purely on, I would say, like, pure speculation, like not even tied to anything happening in the real world, but rather just a consideration of what other people are going to invest in or not invest in. Everything effectively becomes a meme coin. And that's possible. That's completely possible. It's completely possible. And to which I have to say then, right? Like, liberals, you see the issue now, right? You see the issue with, like, the stock market as a concept. When you detach speculative investment from real world economic conditions, you create a bubble. Like, all I have to say is that the robber barons from 150 years ago were way the fuck more concerned with the economic well-being of the country they resided in than today. Back then, like, Henry Ford was like, if I pay my workers the right wage, they can afford the cars that we produce. Therefore, I increase my own market, my own market share, basically. Back then, it was like, we need the roads to work so people can, take the tram to work. We need these conditions to exist so that everything can be produced. We need the steel to come in, we need the copper to come in. We need things to be working properly. But we might be reaching a point where, like, oh, check out the stock market. It's on Blurp, it's on Flugel. Oh, you have you invested? Have you, like, man, you didn't get in on the ground floor of BitShit? BitShit just went up 9,000% overnight. Why? No one knows. Get in before it dumps. And it dumped. Poob has it. It's on Clit. Yeah, essentially it becomes the dot-com bubble, except the dot-com bubble popped because people realized eventually that none of this shit would actually make money, except it never pops. A bubble that never pops. An iron bubble. An article in the Financial Times in a similar vein, quote, Goldman Sachs chief hopeful that Trump will listen to corporate America? Christ alive.
That with some real money selling, and you get these moves.
So you don't think it's sovereigns, potentially it's hedge funds unwinding?
I have no evidence that it's sovereigns. And look, Anne-Marie, not you, but the nature of journalism is to create a headline that 10 days ago, when 10-year yields hit 390, said, well, Secretary Bessent got what he wanted. He got 10-year yields down, but it's the wrong reason. Now, I forget what they hit on Friday, maybe 440 something.
We saw a 50 basis move last week in 10-year yield. At the same time, the dollar was weakening nearly 3%. How do you simultaneously look at that situation? It feels like investors are dumping U.S. assets.
Well, look, I've learned that...
Holy Christ, I'm sorry. I didn't realize. Maybe this is information that I already had. Just, like, look at the USX to the euro. I didn't realize it had gone down. I hadn't checked in a little bit. I didn't realize that it had cratered like that and still hasn't gone up. It's been hovering. Holy shit. Good time to buy some foreign money? Yeah, can I open up, like, a German Roth IRA or something? You looked at this earlier? Yeah, well, you know what? My brain is soup, and you're the one who watches me. You're downstream of me, okay? You're drinking the water that I'm shitting in. You're downstream. Maybe you already covered it. Why would you buy euro when it's high? Because the implication is that this trend is going to continue to diverge. Like, the value of the US dollar is just going to keep dropping.
Not to look at what happens over a week, right? Like, I, for better or worse, have lived through a lot of these things, and in trading, in one's personal trading history, it's the scar tissue that sticks with you the most. I can tell you exactly where I was standing in 1998 when the long-term capital, the debacle happened. That had nothing to do with anything other than a bunch of geniuses up in Greenwich who had too much leverage.
So you're not concerned at this moment about the U.S. dollar or the U.S. Treasury losing safe haven asset.
Will things get cheaper in the EU, though? Everything is going to get more expensive everywhere on Earth. The world was already maximized for lowest prices. You can go into a Walmart right now and get like shit that people would have killed for 100 years ago for literally $1. You know? We're already at the low point price-wise. Everything is going to go up everywhere.
No, look,
we're still a global reserve currency.
We are still a global reserve currency. We have a strong dollar policy. The dollar can go up and down. If you go and look back at President Trump's first term, I don't remember the exact number, but the dollar in 2017 went down, I can't remember, 7, 8, 9%, and then once the tax bill was done, took off for the remainder of his term.
Have you spoken to the Fed at all about contingency plans, though, if financial stability risks flare up?
Chair Powell and I have breakfast every week, and we discuss a wide range of things. And
those must be fun conversations. Hey, so you saw that Trump wants you to lower the interest rates to 0, right? Yeah, I can't do that, though. That'd, like, collapse the economy. It'd be really bad. Yeah, but eventually you're going to have to. Like, he'll make you eventually. We're distracting him right now with jangling keys, children's toys, and the whole China thing. Eventually he will, like, have Doge remove you somehow.
You know, our staffs are always in contact. We have a markets room, they have a markets room, but you know, and specifically, did we discuss some kind of a break the glass? I think we're a long way from that.
So when was the last time you guys spoke? You had breakfast last week?
We had breakfast last week, and it was an away game. I was over at the Fed.
And no concern so far from the Fed chair and what he saw in the Treasury market?
I think we would have heard from the Fed chair. I think we heard from Governor Collins of Boston on Friday. We heard from Governor Weller today on his...
I think we would have heard from Powell.
Thoughts on what tariffs mean. So it seems like business as usual.
When it comes to the Fed chair, his term is up May 2026. So we're almost 12 months out from that. When are you going to start to think about and have these discussions with the president about who should lead the Fed?
Well, we think about it all the time. I think when are we going to start the interviewing candidates? And that'll be sometime in the fall.
In the fall, so about 6 months lead time.
Yep.
The U.S. Supreme Court recently came out with a ruling that the executive branch, the president for now, could oust top officials at independent agencies. Yep. And that has some individuals in the market a little bit concerned about what this could mean for the independence of the Fed, which is really a cherished pillar of wanting to invest in America. Do you have any concern about potentially President Trump ousting Fed Chair Jay Powell or the independence of the Fed?
Well, and Marie, I've repeatedly said the Fed has two duties, and I believe that monetary policy is a jewel box that's got to be preserved, and then they have regulatory policies, and I think we can have more of a discussion because the Fed is one among 3 bank regulators, and there's the Fed, Controller of the Currency, and the FDIC. So I think it's very easy to delineate between those two.
So at the moment, no concern?
No concern.
When you talk to Fed Chair Jay Powell at the moment...
Sorry, I know you're all bored of this and want me to get to the really funny J.D. Vance clip, and I promise you that we're going to get to that as soon as this is done, but this is actually really important information.
It doesn't sound like they feel like the need to step in on this unraveling we saw last week with the bond market. Does the Treasury have any plans to do something if this was to become more unnerving?
Well, look, the Treasury has lots of things we can do, and but again, I think we're a long way from that.
But all options would be on the table?
Sure. But again, we have a big toolkit that we can roll out. We do regular off-the-run buybacks. We could up the buybacks if we wanted. So.
Just finally, I want to get your thoughts on something you told me, John, and Lisa in February, which was that in your old world, you would be that person with your ear against the door trying to understand what policymakers were doing.
Am I wrong for thinking Bessent is actually competent, just evil? Oh, it's not a matter of competence. It's just that he's told to launder the administration's decisions for the public. His competence has nothing to do with it. Like, he is aware of the fact that what he is doing is economically destructive. But he's paid to be the president's henchman, so that's that. He is a smart person. It's just not really relevant in the, in his position. He's intelligent when it comes to, like, economic decision making, but what he's doing isn't really economic decision making. He's just laundering lies. And in that capacity, he's subpar. He's not very good at being an envoy for the president.
So then you could predict where financial markets would go. In this moment where we hear from top executives constantly, today it was the Goldman Sachs CEO, last week it was JB Diamond, and this uncertainty, especially around tariff policy, what advice would you be giving to your old self?
To look at the whole policy and then deregulation from our area on the financial side and in the rest of the economy. That takes a little longer, but that will start.
But when it comes to the tax cuts, right now, what the market is expecting and what could get done in Congress based on how slim the majority is for the Republicans is just an extension of current policy.
I think that's wrong. I think that the underreported story in the media, the story that's fun to report, doesn't get reported enough, is the Democratic chaos, but the underreported story is the remarkable Republican unity led by President Trump. Speaker Johnson, on first try, got instructions out of the House for the budget. He passed a clean CR first try.
He's not wrong. Johnson's done an incredible job of running the House to our detriment.
Really appreciate your time.
Okay. All right. They petered out towards the end. The first half of this interview was interesting. The second half wasn't. Besant, Bloomberg interview. Does anybody else keep wanting to spell Bloomberg with a U rather than an E? And that, like, they don't, you check yourself, but I feel like I keep wanting to. No? Okay. That's fine. Okay, fine. All right. Sure. Engage in the humiliation ritual. Say no. Keep ostracizing me. See what happens. You know what happens to a white boy who gets ostracized? That's right. They transition. So stop it. Glad I found an off-ramp for that one. Didn't know where else I was going to take that joke, to be honest.